Well, a very good afternoon. Welcome to our brand new Sunday program. It's called The Week Ahead. It's where we set the tone for you for the week ahead on the news front, keep you posted on what to expect from our newsroom, a team of reporters, specialist desk, radio, and of course our online platforms. Well, I'm your host, Liesl Wilson, and it is Youth Day on Wednesday, so our program today will have a very special focus on youth-related matters. For now, though, it's just after 1 o'clock. Let's take a look at your headlines. South Africa's positive coronavirus cases are rising rapidly, with Gauteng recording the highest provincial number of new cases in a 24-hour period. Climate change on top of the agenda on the last day of the G7 summit. The Premier Soccer has officially crowned eTonquini United FC as the Glad Africa champions. Royal AM, who finished the second, will play in the PSL promotion and relegation playoffs against Chipper United and Richards Bay. Well, delving into our top story now, June is Youth Month in South Africa. On this day, the country commemorates contributions made by the youth in 1976 in fighting for the liberation. However, the youth of today is fighting a more silent battle, mental illness. A group of students from Gqeberha have produced a film to create awareness on mental issues.
To Find a Soul a Home, a film aimed at creating awareness on mental illness. Director Kanisile Chazibana grew up in KwaMaxake in Gqeberha, and this is where she found inspiration for this film. This after a neighbor tried to burn herself as she was feeling misunderstood by her family. She suffered from schizophrenia for years, but was deemed possessed by traditional healers and the church. Fortunately, the neighbor saved her life, but had no knowledge of her condition. Afterwards, they assumed this was an attention-seeking stunt.
They were blaming her for what she was doing, and they didn't understand her. They were saying things like she should have just burnt herself somewhere far if she wanted to kill herself, because now she's complicating everyone's life, and it was a matter of she's seeking for attention and she's not really ill. Maybe she's got demons or all of those things. And that's what made me then write the story, because in our black communities, mental illness isn't something that's taken seriously, or they always associate it with everything else but the actual situation. So it's always like possessed, you have demons, you have been bewitched, and all of those things. And essentially what I'm trying to tell with the story is that you need to listen to people when they suffer from mental illness.
In 2020, the World Health Organization indicated that at least 20% of adolescents have some type of mental illness. 50% of these disorders occur by the age of 14. Assistant director for this film, Bogle Gwakla, suffers from an amalgamation of post-traumatic stress disorder, a social anxiety and panic disorder that stems from his youth. Growing up in a staunch Christian home, he says his problems were not taken seriously.
And that obviously had dire effects on me, coming from a very impoverished background, Christian background at that, of which the entire disposition of the overarching family was that you pray the problems away. And it gets even harder when you're a black queer kid, when intersectionality comes into the picture, because you're not only oppressed as somebody with these anxieties, but as a queer person with these anxieties. So there are limitations as to how you can express yourself and express the panic attacks, the grief, the pain, and just the reactions that you'd have from getting these anxiety attacks. I remember when I was younger, I grew up with my aunt who was very stern. And whenever I would express myself or express a grievance, it's either I get a slap in the face that get it together, or it's just ignored and not taken seriously.
Many young people are either not aware or keep quiet about their illnesses due to stereotypes in society. According to the World Health Organization, this is one of the reasons the youth suicidal rate is constantly increasing. Cast and crew members who took part in this film say they have learned a lot about themselves and can now define how they feel. They say they are all in it to change the narrative.
Especially black communities or black families, they are not well aware of like mental illnesses, or they are not that they are not, or maybe they just believe that it's not a black thing, like they always say that it's not a black thing, or they always say if you come out and say that you're suffering from a mental illness, it's always a matter of you acting white, or you have white people problems and all those kind of things. So I was happy to play that role.
As a South African black woman, I think it's very common to come across people who are within my demographic in terms of race and age, who sometimes use terms such as yo ansakoi, or oh I don't feel so well, who use terms that have been used in society to downplay mental illness within black communities. And we normally huddle around as friends in all kinds of spaces, and we try and identify what is the problem.
The film will be aired for the AFTA Film Festival later this month. Kim Daniels, SABC News, Gqeberha.
As the country prepares to celebrate Youth Day on Wednesday, opposition parties say the youth of today still lack education opportunities, just like the class of 1976. Members of the National Council of Provinces this week debated Youth Day. The theme was youth development through access to free higher education and expanded access to skills development.
The majority of youth in South Africa still have to jump through hoops to get an education. A former student activist, now a member of the Gauteng legislature, says this has to change fast.
Imagine a black woman student from the rural Eastern Cape. Let's call her Noxolo. She's forced to study in a language foreign to her. English is most likely a second or third language. She cannot afford the fees, so has to get a bursary or a loan. Sometimes these bursaries cover the full cost of study and sometimes not, especially not in a Wits university where you would have to get a top-up because the fees are higher. I've even come across cases, many of them, where the stipend given to poor students is sent home to their families to put food on the table, therefore meaning that the student has nothing left for themselves. And the university space has not decolonized enough to have sufficiently realized that a student such as Noxolo needs extra assistance and help to bridge the gap from a commodified and unequal education system.
Opposition parties lamented the challenges faced by the youth of today.
74.7% of young people in this country are unemployed. Some of these young people have been born into poverty, and thanks to this government's lack of direction, possibly face no chance of freeing themselves from the painful shackles of constantly being reminded that poverty is their home.
As the apartheid government of 1976 did to young people, so is the ANC government doing in 2021. You don't have to shoot them with guns, although you too often do. When the youth of this generation fought for free quality education, the ANC government shot at them, arrested many and killed some.
The Freedom Front Plus encouraged the youth to grab opportunities given to them.
Fear is in your mind. We are not oblivious to the current state of affairs and the ANC-created racial tension that exists. Do not allow fear for failure to keep you from trying. Do not let fear for disappointment prevent you from reaching for the stars. Do not let fear of what people say prevent you from achieving your full potential.
Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Buti Manamela, says government is committed to ensuring that all eligible students can study. On the matter of the high youth unemployment rate, he says it is something that will take time to resolve.
These are structural issues that our government has committed itself to address. They are not merely issues of policy. And I think to live under the delusion that we can implement some policy devices and like a magic wand, we will create employment that will not happen. And that is why our commitment, particularly with the economic recovery plan that was announced by the president late last year, the intention is to deal with the structural inequalities that exist in our society.
The country celebrates Youth Day next Wednesday. Zaleen Merrington, SABC News, Parliament.
June, the month where we commemorate the heroism of our youth against the apartheid regime and its struggles, paints a very different image 45 years later. With quarterly labour force statistics released, many issues continue to plague the youth of today. Now, we are joined by Seth Mazibuko, veteran activist and Chancellor at June 16 Youth Foundation, to explore some of these matters further. Seth, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. So, Stats South Africa revealed the official unemployment rate amongst the youth between 15 and 34 years old, sitting at 46%. How far have initiatives implemented actually yielded the desired results in dealing with youth unemployment to date in South Africa?
Let me just say this to you. We have a problem in this country. We have a government that is quick in making promises and very, very slow, if at all, in delivering those promises. Our young people, I can assure you, they are not, different from the young people of 1976. The only thing that is different now is just that now we have a different rider of the horse, not the same rider that was riding the horse then, which was apartheid. And it is painful to see many of our children and many of our youth, loitering in the streets, if not loitering in the streets, queuing for grants coming from this government that seems to be comfortable in giving grants and stipends instead of empowering our youth to become economically viable. So 45 years down the line, 20 so years down the line of democracy, I think we're still in the same space.
Seth, as the youngest member of the South African Students' Organization that planned and led the Soweto uprising, your work in that arena continues. What are sentiments amongst the youth regarding their inherited reality?
I'm dealing with young people, we call them June 16 brigades, who are young people from the community, and these come from the June 16 Youth Development Foundation. They have to fight, to make sure that now they protect and they protect themselves against GBV. The violent nature of apartheid has actually overspilled into our families and into our streets and into our schools, where you have high rate of GBV, where you have women and children being exposed to death. That's one. Two, you have the same young people who are trying by all means to have what we call a sustainable livelihood, trying to assist women, try to assist young people to come up with programs to sustain themselves. And with a government that is seen, using money carelessly, even that money of COVID-19, you have young people in Soweto who are very, very frustrated. We have the very same young people who are expected to go out there and deal with ESCOM rates, and not only ESCOM rates, but deal with ESCOM cuts, and then who are expected to go out and preach that people should pay for service delivery. Now, that is a schizophrenia that our young people are being put into now. And that's the young people that I'm dealing with, that you are expected for. I usually say to young people, we were stone throwers. You guys must be stone gatherers to reconstruct and develop our country. But they say there are no bricks. There are no stones that are being given to us so that we can reconstruct this country. Instead, those stones are thrown on us. We are being killed. We are being done all sorts of things. That is the schizophrenia our young people are in at the moment.
Seth, just in conclusion, we're looking at South Africa's economy, capacity building, education, and overall training systems that need to be changed in order to achieve a more labor-intensive growth. How can we achieve this? How do we carry on the torch lit by those back in 1976?
1976, we're fighting against colonization of education. Our children are still fighting that. And so, but we've been promised that now the education system should be actually, is going to be decolonized. Past that point. You have we've been promised that the land will be given back to the people. Do we have that? We have a lot of people in the shacks. We have a lot of people without water. We have a lot of people who cannot even afford to live healthy under COVID. So what am I saying to you is that now, comparisons of that time and now is really, we are actually comparing the same, because there isn't much that has changed in as far as our young people are concerned. Maybe it is for this younger generation now to take up the struggle to another level of becoming more harder to our government than they are. But again, we have a problem. Most of our young people have this problem that now, when they become too vocal, they get
Right, Saif Mazibuko, veteran activist and chancellor at the June 16th Youth Foundation, chatting about issues plaguing youth as we commemorate June 16th come Wednesday. We've got more on the other side of this. We continue with our Youth Month celebrations on the other side. Stay tuned.
SABC Radio News. With our footprint and dedicated journalists, we cover all provinces and bring you news from all over the globe. We pride ourselves for delivering in all languages through our 18 radio stations.
Hence, I'm asking you the question.
For balanced news and current affairs. Our radio stations are designed to cater for you. SABC News, independent, impartial.
Welcome back. You're tuned into the week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Now, not enough is being done to assist youth living with disabilities to realize their full economic potential. This is according to Letlogonolo Mafela, who, despite being born without arms, beat the odds by passing his matric with flying colors and graduating from the Northwest University using his feet and mouth to write. Our reporter Tebogo Pakedi and video journalist Moleboheng Kayane filed this report.
My name is Letlogonolo Mafela. I'm from a small village in the outskirts of Mafikeng called Batsepa village. I was born without arms called diamelia, which is the absence of both limbs. In 2019, I graduated from the Northwest University with a Bachelor of Commerce in Economics. I'm a musician, I'm a DJ, music producer, a songwriter, I'm a father too.
After passing matric with flying colors in 2011, Letlogonolo Mafela later graduated to become an economist. But for him, while Youth Month is being recognized for the 26th time this year, the purpose of the commemoration is largely ignored.
I'm disappointed on the day itself, the 16th of June, which is the Youth Day. It was a day that the youth were actually fighting for their rights in terms of education, free education, quality education, and such things. I'm disappointed because of the people that are actually appointed in Parliament, Noyana, are the same people that were in the street throwing stones. Let's get free education and quality education. Those are the same people that should actually be pushing such agendas, such matters in Parliament, because they are our current leaders. But they're not doing that.
Mafela says youth living with disabilities do not have equal opportunities like able people. With economic participation also skewed, he proposes that government change tax policies for disabled people.
I would suggest the government should probably either reduce taxes on disabled employees or actually cut the taxes off completely on disabled employees. The same way they were able to provide the disabled person from a young age with disability grant, they should also be able to do that on taxes.
Disability Info SA, which is an organization for persons with a disability, says more needs to be done to ensure inclusivity.
Persons with disabilities, especially the youth, are still at a huge disadvantage when it comes to school, university, and job opportunities. We at Disability Info South Africa believe that the rules and regulations regarding the rights of persons with disabilities need to be enforced so that comply to the regulations that currently exist. If this does not happen, persons with disabilities will continue to be discriminated and disadvantaged in society. Without an inclusive society, persons with disabilities will never be seen as equals and will always be disadvantaged.
Mafela continues to be an advocate for persons with disabilities. Tebogo Phakedi, SABC News, Mahikeng.
Meanwhile, 45 years since the class of 76 took to the streets in the fight for liberation, challenges for today's youth are still many. From high unemployment rate to the rising cost of education, more still needs to be done to change the plight of the youth. For more on this, we are joined live from Johannesburg by former Fees Must Fall student activist Fasiya Hassan. Fasiya, thank you very much for joining us. You, of course, were a student activist fighting in the Fees Must Fall movement. What challenges do you think are still facing the youth today, considering the groundwork that you and your team laid back then?
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for all the viewers. Quite a number. You mentioned it. The first one, of course, the extremely high youth unemployment rate, number one. Number two, in as much as we still continue to fight, I think there's still large gaps and barriers to entry in the education system, but also there's a general feeling of disillusion amongst young people not feeling very well represented by the system, or even just feeling as if the system looks after them. So there's a number of different issues. You can range them from housing to social grants and all of that, but young people at the end of the day are not feeling as if they're looked after, and they're not feeling as if their voices are as important as they should be. So for me, it's really across the board.
And then Fasiya, we obviously have stats to back it up. 46% of youth today unemployed. When you hear such alarming stats, what goes through your mind? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, first thing, that's the narrow definition. So the number is probably way more than that. Remember, they're calculated with, if somebody stops looking for a job and they've given up, they're not even considered in that statistic. And I can tell you there's a huge amount of young people who are sitting in that boat. So for me, 46% is actually less than what the actual truthful number is. For me, it gives me sleepless nights. I think it was 2 days ago that I was debating in the NCOP, the National Council of Provinces, and I was calling it a national crisis and calling on all the different leaders who are in that space to call it what it is, a national crisis that requires all of us to put what we have aside and really ultimately focus on how we're going to fix this. We have a country where the majority of the population is under the age of 35. So when you're telling us that the youth unemployment rate is sitting at 46%, probably more, it means the majority of young people are sitting outside of the economy. So it's about a number of different interventions, right? It is about education, it is about skills development, but it's also about creating job opportunities and employment opportunities. And in addition to that, probably the most important part is around entrepreneurship. So how do we move from being job seekers as young people to being job creators? So there's a number of different interventions that are required. But for me, there isn't one size fits all kind of solution here. We really need a multi-pronged approach to get to the solution that we need.
Fasiya, each generation has its own struggles, needs to identify its struggles and then take action. The class of 2021, looking back at what the class of 1976 perhaps achieved, what lessons can be learned? How do we carry the torch forward? And obviously ahead of marking Youth Day on the 16th of June, on Wednesday.
Many different lessons for me. The one is that the struggle for youth and for young people in this country is beyond just June 16th and beyond just the month of June. Of course, we commemorate it, but it's important that we continue this fight every single day, which of course was always the generation of 1976. That was their mandate. But I think lessons to learn, really just the courage. The ability to stand up to the system, the ability to say, no, we're not going to be sort of people who just are brought along through the process. And sometimes I feel that we as young people, we're just going through the motions, right? We just feel like one day, one step, etc. But in reality, are we taking enough charge in the space? And I say that as a young public representative, I say that as a youth leader, and I really think it's time for us to kick down the door and stop waiting for someone to help us and to really do it ourselves.
Fasiya Hassan, Aluta Continua, thank you very much for joining us. Fasiya Hassan is, of course, a former student activist and member of the Fees Must for Movement, joining us to discuss some of the issues that continue to plague youth as we commemorate the struggle fought for back in 1976. Another big story this coming week, former eTonquini Mayor Zandile Gumede is amongst those affected by the ANC step-aside resolution. The fraud and corruption case against former eTonquini Mayor Zandile Gumede and 21 others has been transferred to the Durban High Court, where they are due to appear on the 14th of June. During their brief appearance in the Durban Magistrates Court on the 23rd of March 2021, the state handed copies of the indictment to the accused. Among Gumede's co-accused are eTonquini Municipal Manager Sipho Nzunza and a number of business people. The charges emanate from a 2017 Durban solid waste tender of over 400 million rand. During Gumede's last appearance, scores of supporters, some as far as from the Free State, arrived outside the court ahead of her appearance. A group coming from the ANC's Fezile Derby region says they believe in Gumede's innocence. Well, that's where we leave it for you this week. We'll be back next week, of course, for a look at the week where it was. From myself, Liesl Wilson, and the rest of the team, until next time, it is goodbye for now.